the Sustainability Management Master's Program, you are answering one simple question. Do you care about your future generation? If you care about your kids, their grandkids, then you care about sustainability. And a sustainability manager is someone who has the tools to make people understand how they can contribute towards developing a sustainable world. We have both part-time and full-time students. Our curriculum is 30 hours. Instead of thesis, we have a research project course and a seminar course which provides them with the kind of research background they will need to be successful in their job. But at the same time, sustainability is not always everything about environment. It also relates to the business. They will take a sustainable business strategies course. They will take a project management course. Most of these courses are going to be taught by industry people, the people who are doing sustainability on a daily basis as a part of their job. Any organization that has a large number of employees and has a physical infrastructure, they will have to have a sustainability office. If you have the passion to develop and maintain a sustainable world, come to us and we will help you shape your passion into a career which will create an impact.
The floor is all yours.
Thank you so much. And it's a real pleasure to be here. It's a nice moment to cover this topic. And we'll dive right in. So today I'll be covering opportunities to reduce emissions from port operations, be it from the vessels themselves to within the port landside operations as well, and looking at the port holistically and seeing what we can do to reduce emissions, improve air quality, and decarbonize. So, brief agenda. We'll focus on why we're focused on ports. We'll look at those alternative fuel opportunities. Then we have New York City has a Blue Highways program. It's just kicking off, kind of sponsored by EDC. Very exciting program. Recently, I just received some new global insights on reducing maritime emissions through the Consulate of Norway. And with that, I also received an update on Norway's green shipping program, a beautiful pilot program they're laying out for the country. And then finally, New York State has incentives related to reducing port emissions that are ongoing right now. So this presentation is more focused on New York. It touches on New Jersey a little bit, but it's just the nature of my work and focus right now. So why focus on ports and reducing emissions there? So ports have always been overlooked in this regard. You're aware of all of the EPA mandates and goals of reducing emissions with trucks and cars and vehicles, and your personal vehicle can't be inspected or pass inspection without having the proper emissions standards met. And vessels and ports did not have standards until very recently. So we had very old engines and just diesel-based operations ongoing for decades, and we're finally getting to a point where we're addressing those old fossil fuel diesel emissions. So ports are an important part of the U.S. economy with much expected growth in the future. Currently account for about 23 million jobs, directly, indirectly. Port-related fossil fuel, diesel emissions, really have an adverse effect on public health and the climate. And so right now, there's a very achievable opportunity to minimize port-related fossil fuel emissions, to improve air quality, public health, and those climate effects. So we'll dive into the public health and climate impacts. Human health is affected by the diesel emissions that release PM is particulate matter, size 2.5, PM 2.5, that's the micron size. Nitrous oxides, air toxics. There's carbon dioxide as well. These can all contribute to significant health problems, and diesel emissions are considered a likely human carcinogen. EJ, this is environmental justice communities. In New Jersey, they're called overburdened communities. Many ports and port-related corridors are located in areas with high percentages of low-income and minority populations, who are often disproportionately impacted by higher levels of diesel emissions. So we also have climate impacts. As we know, diesel emissions release greenhouse gases, including carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and what's called climate force agents such as black carbon soot. That's a particulate as well. So the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers estimates that bigger post-Panamax size ships, these are these large freight ships you'll see going to Port Newark, Port Elizabeth, they represent 62% of the total global container ship capacity. So we're going to be increasing to this capacity by 2030. By 2030, we'll be at 62%. Port-related diesel-powered vehicles, equipment, and ships produce significant amounts of air pollution and contribute to climate change. EPA estimates that approximately 39 million people in the U.S. live in close proximity to the ports. And like we we're saying, especially the environmental justice communities. And here's a look at that. So ports in non-attainment and maintenance areas. So these are areas that have various air quality pollution that's unacceptable in accordance with the national air quality standards set by the US EPA. And as you see with the legend over here, the types of air pollutants, ozone in pink, PM 2.5 in blue, sulfur dioxide in yellow, PM 10, this is a larger particulate, and the hash mark, harder to see, uh, nit nitrogen dioxide in green, and carbon monoxide as well in black. So as you can see, we're hitting all these coastal areas or even areas that follow the major rivers, um, and you really have a close proximity associated with these air quality compromised areas from all the diesel emissions. So when we look at a port, there's not just the vessels. We look at these types of equipment associated. So there's drayage trucks. I'm going to show you photos of these in the following slides. Freight rail trains, cargo handling equipment. So there's harbor vessels. These are the tugboats and barges that stay exclusively within New York Harbor, and then ocean-bound vessels. Drayage trucks are a combination of the short-haul trucks that move cargo into and out of ports. Drayage trucks are typically to travel the shorter distances to and from a port to a nearby rail yard or distribution center, like an Amazon, for example. Amazon is a huge driver these days, as we know. Rail emission sources include switcher and line haul locomotives. Switchers move rail cars short distances within a rail yard, and then the line haul locomotives are those long distance engines that travel from the port to those distance locations. When you look at the boats, the vessels, or sometimes they're called crafts, you've got the two types, generally. Harbor vessels, these are engines less than 30 liters. They're called Category 1 and 2 vessels, tugs, barges, and ferries. Then you have the ocean-bound vessels, much larger engines, and these are typically more of your diesel engines, greater than 30-liter engines. These are Category 3 vessels. These are called bulk carriers, container ships, cruise ships, roll on, roll off ships, and tankers, like fuel tankers. So as we have business as usual at these ports, the carbon dioxide emissions just keep growing exponentially as the years go by. And as you see, this graph starts in 2011 in blue, and it takes you out to 2050 in yellow, and you can see how these emissions just keep growing. Um, but as you can see, the main culprit here, when you look at the port operations, is the vessels, is the boats. So OGV, the ocean-bound vessels, and the harbor craft is what contribute the most, followed by the drayage trucks. So what can we do here? We're considering decarbonization strategies and alternative fuel opportunities. So we'll take a look at our options. Electrification. This is kind of the dream scenario where you replace those diesel-powered equipment and systems with electric equipment, especially cargo handling equipment like cranes, vehicles, but also vessels, um, and the boats. And to assist those vessels, you need to add shore power at the port. So the vessel comes up to the port, and you can plug it in and charge those boats. Currently, there's a bit of that capability at port authorities, ports, and Port Newark and Port Elizabeth. Right now, the city is reconstructing South Brooklyn Marine Terminal, and they will be adding this major shore power at the port to really facilitate electric boats. Hybrid boats, these combine diesel or gas engines with electric motors, just like a hybrid car. And they have battery storage to reduce emissions, noise, and fuel consumption. Um, there's a transition happening now. Hybrids are being applied to tugboats, ferries, vessels, cranes, and other equipment. Ethanol. Ethanol is being used. It's a low carbon alternative fuel for marine vessels. Is a cleaner burning option. And it's what they call a practical drop-in fuel for current marine vessels, meaning you don't have to modify the engine much at all to bring in ethanol. It's a diesel burning engine today. You can bring in ethanol and start receiving those results of reduced emissions. And so when you do use ethanol and these different fuels we're going to go through, what becomes important is how that is produced. So this last line here, decarbonization is maximized if it's derived from sustainable biomass. So you try to look at the whole supply chain and production of these fuels and do your best to reduce emissions along that production process. Biodiesel, that's another low carbon fuel. Sometimes they use fatty acid methyl ester, also called FAME, often derived from cooking oil. Hydro-treated vegetable oil, soybean based is very common. And this reduces greenhouse gas emissions and that black carbon soot by up to 81%. Methanol, another low carbon marine fuel that reduces sulfur dioxide PMs by over 95% and nitrous oxides by up to 80%. It is liquid at ambient temperature, easy to handle, store, and bunker than gases like LNG or ammonia, and it's ideal for retrofitting vessel engines and has a low ignition temperature. Ammonia, this is being used more in Europe. Ammonia is a low carbon marine fuel. It has a high energy density, no CO2 emissions, The toxicity requires specialized training for crew with robust safety regulations. The goal is to use green ammonia that's produced from renewable sources and to end up with zero emissions. Blue ammonia is natural gas based production of ammonia that can also be considered, and that you can have a natural gas production with carbon capture to help reduce those emissions. LNG, uh, liquid nitrogen gas, I'm sorry, natural gas, cleaner burning fuel alternative to diesel for shipping, reducing sulfur emissions by 99%. And I think I meant to say NOx by 25%. Modern vessels use diesel fuel engines that can operate on both LNG and traditional fuels. And this one is more common as we look at the fleets out there today. There's over 772 active vessels using LNG. Hydrogen. This would be an amazing fuel source. It's very expensive, but it's still being rolled out. This is a zero emission fuel for maritime decarbonization. It's using fuel cells or modified engines to eliminate pollutants, emitting only water vapor. Hydrogen can be stored as a compressed gas or a cryogenic liquid. Liquid hydrogen requires 4 times more storage space than diesel for the same amount of energy. So that impacts the cargo capacity. So that's a challenge there. So as it stands today, hydrogen is being used, more on harbor vessels, those with shorter trips because of that, cargo capacity need. And again, you have to look at how the hydrogen is produced. Green hydrogen is produced from renewables, and Norway is producing hydrogen using offshore wind or onshore wind, and that process results in net zero emissions. So when we look at New York State, biodiesel and renewable diesel is being rolled out and used in pilot programs. Um, ports Portside diesel is being sold wholesale and incorporated into terminal product offerings in the New York region. Renewable diesel is beginning to also appear at the terminals. Trials are underway across multiple ferry operations. When you ride the Staten Island ferry today, that's powered by biodiesel. A nice success story. Other ferries are starting to use it as well. The engine warranty implications are an active concern. Sometimes there's a little bit of higher maintenance required on these engines. Diesel engine compatibility varies by age. The older engines present greater integration challenges than the newer diesel engines. Sourcing and storage logistics are a barrier. Fuel is being shipped sometimes from as far away as the Gulf Coast, and identifying those storage locations locally in the New York Harbor is a bit of a challenge. But as New York State looks to incentivize using biodiesel and renewable diesel, other states have been successful and effective in increasing biodiesel production by issuing policy incentives for these ports. So New York State is now considering introducing policies to introduce these biodiesel fuels. Alternative fuel status, as we look across the industry, current baseline nearshore operations use ultra low sulfur diesels, fuels. Offshore vessels largely rely on heavy fuel oil. And that's kind of our starting point when we look at transition of different fuel types. Hybrid vessels is a transitional strategy. That technology is being deployed in offshore wind vessel support operations. I'm going to show you a hybrid vessel in a few slides later. So it's suggesting a pragmatic stepping stone approach towards a fuller alternative fuel option. So it's hybrids is a nice step one, but it's not the full answer. Key potential drivers. Marine vessel emission standards were cited as a potential catalyst, and prospective port tenants have interests in alternative fuels. Research and design is ongoing at some ports, but it's always contingent on investment. So where we are today, the fuel transition period is the reality. Like I was saying, it's these hybrid technologies, it's biodiesels, it's these low carbon fuels we just went through, ethanol, methanol, even ammonia. This is where we are today. It's a good starting point. We're not at zero emissions yet, but it's reducing those emissions. New fuels face three major hurdles, the price, availability, and infrastructure. So all of those things is what our future engineers and port operators and vessel designers need to focus on. And I'm hoping some of those are in our audience today. So this is going to be your challenge to work on these hurdles to rolling out and improve fuels. Some port and vessel owners are moving ahead. Many have set decarbonization paths. Some outpace regulation. Um, so one of the main reasons the port and vessel owners are moving ahead is using these fuels and improved operations are opportunities for cost savings and operational efficiencies. So, you can pursue a green port operation and result in cost savings. And so that's attractive to any port vessel operator. Also, many companies have ESG company goals, and so they're doing their best to incorporate those goals into the port and vessel operations. So now we're going to take a look at New York City's Blue Highways program that's happening right in front of you in the New York Harbor. So Blue Highways program was started under the previous mayor administration with New York City EDC. They're calling it, part of the Harbor of the Future. Harbor of the Future seeks to reimagine and reactivate New York City's waterfront. So there's a number of goals with this program, but for the purposes of ports and vessel decarbonization, there's kind of two of these goals that apply, as highlighted in red here. Reactivating the highways for freight transportation using zero emission vehicles to decarbonize the supply chain. They're also trying to spur innovation in the green economy with technology, life sciences, and other high growth sectors using the city's waterfront and waterfront assets. So further goals of the program, again, the primary goal is to improve quality of life for New York City. And by doing that, let me just, I want to do this. By doing that, the city is trying to encourage more efficient means of moving freight. And this is through waterborne vessel movements throughout the harbor. It's much more efficient to move bulk freight by vessels than dividing it up in trucks and distributing it all over the city. For example, the Port Port Elizabeth and Port Newark on the New Jersey side, and moving all of that freight over to Brooklyn and Queens by truck. So why can't we do a little more with vessels and be more efficient? So they're trying to take trucks off the road and move a greater volume of freight with vessels. And by doing this, you'll be improving the quality of life for New York City, reducing middle mile truck-based transportation, shifting last mile delivery from trucks to bikes and vans, and decreasing that regional and local traffic, and overall improving air quality. And by instituting this program, one of the a few major elements of the program is building infrastructure to support waterborne freight movement and work on developing industry buy-in, partnering with industry for successful implementation of pilots and programs, and lead by example, facilitate municipal bulk movements by water, encourage alternative vehicle and energy sources for freight. So that's an overview of the goals of the program. So when we have maritime freight movement, it leverages the city's historic strength as a port city with modern enhancements and sustainable operations to alleviate congested corridors, including port electrification, zero emission vehicles and vessels, micromobility, and streamlining freight transportation. Department of Sanitation, DSNY, has been shifting trash movements onto barges and overall decreasing truck trips. And as you can see here, two examples, moving 3,600 tons of waste per day by water is what is happening, and that eliminates over 1,000 daily truck trips. That's that's pretty significant when you look at traffic. Building 6 routes across 25 landings for freight movement. Infrastructure serves more than 7 million annual riders in previously underserved neighborhoods. That's referring to ferries, 6 new ferry routes. Just a couple examples. Here's a few more examples. They're looking at introducing a new operator for a multimodal downtown skyport. So this is down by Wall Street, which will activate a Blue Highways landing in 2027. So they have multiple types of freight movements there. Up in Hunts Point, they've announced a new aggregate and food and beverage marine terminal up there with ConAg Global and Fulton Fish Market. There was a prison barge there that was just relocated, and so now they're going to kind of reactivate this waterfront to help with freight movement there. And there's a huge food distribution center there, so it's a nice alignment with that bulk freight movement. And then over at the Brooklyn Marine Terminal, the city has large plans to kind of reactivate a 60-acre port over there as well. The city just acquired that terminal from Port Authority. Roadway and freight movement challenges for New York City. Freight volumes are growing. 67% growth in freight volumes are projected through 2045. But our roadways are full, and represent 20 billion annual economic costs of congestion in New York City. And the roadways are very expensive to maintain. One truck causes the roadways wear and tear of 300 cars. So just kind of some example statistics there, why we need to get the trucks off the road. And here's, the physical barrier. As you see, I keep talking about Port Newark and Port Elizabeth over here, where so much there's rail freight, and even from Newark Airport, a lot of freight arrives this way, plus shipping freight, under the Verrazano and um, from China and global freight, arrives here, but then we need to distribute it to New York City. And they, transfer all of the containers onto trucks and look at how that congests these highways, through Staten Island, across the Verrazano, or you have to go north up to George Washington Bridge. So this is really a big hardship to move the freight this way. And so again, trying to move the freight away from the trucks. 90% of the freight's moved by truck today, and only 8% is moved by water. So they're looking holistically at the supply chain, um, from the first mile to the last mile, you know, from the factory and container ships, and that first mile to middle mile being the tractor trailers and then regional distribution. Let's get it off the roads and down here to barges and ferries and piers. And then finally, once you do arrive at the port, that last mile, instead of box trucks to the customer's home, you can use electric cargo bikes, electric fans, to reduce those emissions as well. To look at the whole, supply chain transportation system. Um, so when you look at the Blue Highways program, um, the inbound barge deliveries to Hunts Point Food Distribution Center we were talking about up here in the Bronx. Um, we're going to be looking at maximizing freight movements there by barge. Outbound barge deliveries from ConAg Hunts Point Terminal, 2 landings in Manhattan and Brooklyn. So once they depart here, um, here's the destinations they're looking at to help distribute across Queens and Brooklyn. And the obvious benefits, we're reducing trucks on the George Washington Bridge, highways and local streets, and improving air quality. So this new hub here is going to be a big deal, and Hunts Point is going to hopefully really help reduce trucks. And then there's all these other opportunities. There's over 25 other locations under consideration that EDC is investigating. The use of these landing sites and really trying to help facilitate that waterborne freight movement, across Manhattan and the boroughs here. And what's not shown is Staten Island. Staten Island is part of the network as well. Here are current fleet emission reduction measures as part of the Blue Highways program. They're making some meaningful progress. They're making this switch to renewable diesel fuels is the best way to quickly reduce carbon emissions. A drop in fuel replacement results with 60 to 75% less carbon intensity than ultra low sulfur diesel fuels. 2 vessel pilots were completed in June 2025 and targeting a fleet-wide rollout in 2026. And that I believe that's some one of their ferry fleets, New York City waterways, I believe. They're also looking at upgrading the largest vessels to EPA Tier 4. That's the most efficient diesel engines out there today. This will result in local air quality benefits, reducing the NOx emissions and PM emissions by more than 60%. And the design and planning process is underway. And then looking at the fleets, there's a zero emissions transition. Fleet scale deployment requires early stage technology to advance, but they're starting out with these pilot projects. So as you can see, the battery and fuel cell vessels, hydrogen powered fuel cells and batteries are under consideration. This is a ferry sea change is a ferry out in San Francisco, I believe. I've got a slide on that later. So that's one of the first hydrogen ferries, powered ferries in the U.S. So that's under consideration. Um, they're looking at combustion engines with green fuels, and looking at you know introducing those alternative fuels like methanols and um, ways to convert the diesel engines into using the cleaner fuels. And they're also looking at battery and charging development. There's early stage efforts to unlock new vessel construction methods, um, from factors to drastically reduce energy needs and ease the transition challenges. So they're focused on that transition as well. So yeah, this is just the beginning of these studies. So keep your eye out for progress on these three fronts. Pathways towards harbor decarbonization. So a citywide harbor plan will streamline this decarbonization effort. There's the ongoing efforts include increasing usage of waterways for freight transportation, using zero-emission vehicle vessels to decarbonize the supply chain. The New York City Ferry, sustainability planning towards zero emissions, that's happening. The MOCEJ, this is the mayor's office branch, completed the city's first harbor inventory of marine activity and emissions in the harbor. And contrary to expectations, the smaller vessels, such as ferries, account for the majority of the harbor emissions. Um, so that's really a focus of why they're focused on the ferries, because they do result in 90% of all New York City harbor emissions. Um, Over 50% of the emissions can be reduced by decarbonization of the top 100 vessels. And I think that means the top 100 polluting vessels. Um, the planned efforts, as part of this decarbonization plan, is an interagency coordination that'll be happening. There's going to be an harbor inventory and looking at the ports and harbors holistically, and coordinating those decarbonization efforts across all the city and state agencies, and then leading a comprehensive decarbonization plan that outlines a phased, actionable pathway to carbon neutrality in the harbor by 2050. So very lofty goals, and it's all underway. Okay, so here are some industry-leading decarbonizations of vessels and port equipment. I just want to give you some highlights here, some exciting things happening. You might not see a lot of press. So the Eco Liberty is a plug-in hybrid vessel. This is one of the first ones in the U.S. It was launched by Edison HOS offshore in June 2025. It was constructed down in Louisiana. It does have the capability of sailing under battery power. It charges port side using shore power. So the idea with this vessel is it operates in short distances within the city harbor under electric mode, so no emissions with the high density populations. And then once it does enter the ocean and they need that stronger power source, it'll switch to fossil fuels, diesel, whatever they do have, um, in that area in the ocean, and that's away from the population. So you're getting instant results with this vessel in New York City. As you see on the side, Empire Wind, that's an offshore wind farm being constructed as we speak, about 20, 25 miles off the coast of Staten Island. This vessel has been used for that construction in the last 9, 10 months. It's already happening. Um, Here's a little more detail on the Eco Liberty. Here it is, assisting with the construction of those offshore wind turbines. This is the Empire Wind farm under construction out here. They do have all of the foundations. These yellow towers are already installed, and now it's they're starting the above water construction, and it's all based out of South Brooklyn Marine Terminal. That's in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. And again, it results in zero emissions in the harbor. E-Wolf. This is the first electric tugboat in the U.S. It's an 82-foot vessel. It was constructed by Crowley. It features a 6.2 megawatt battery system producing 70 tons of bollard pull. So in use over a decade, it will eliminate 3,100 metric tons of carbon dioxide, 178 tons of NOx, and 2.5 tons of diesel particulate matter. Great thing. That's just an example of what a diesel tug would emit, but now it's electric. It's being used out in San Francisco, I believe. Crowley also has what they call an E-tug. So this is a hybrid tugboat. Hybrid electric, a little larger, 89-foot vessel, very efficient and astute design. It's crafted to comply with the latest CARB regulations on the West Coast. Those are California's air emissions regulations. And then this is one I mentioned earlier. This is the first hydrogen ferry called Sea Change. That's in San Francisco. All these great things start in California. It's a 70-foot, 75 passenger catamaran, using hydrogen fuel, built by All American Marine. The vessel owner is Switch Marine, has a 300-mile range. Very exciting. Love to see those in New York. So holistically, when we look at the port side emission reductions, here's some of the trends we're seeing. Port Authority at Port Liberty, New York, that's their major port in Staten Island. They are electrifying cranes and equipment out there. Other ports are looking at retreading tires. When you retread the tires, recycling tires, it uses 20% of the materials needed for a new tire, preserving resources without compromising the performance. Sorry, I'll go back. Chassis refurbishment. So this is, part of the frame and chassis of the equipment. They refurbish it, remove the rust, recoat it, and just maintain what they have, and then extends the equipment life by up to 12 years. So these strategies deliver reliable, high-performing assets to customers, reducing costs, minimizing the environmental impact. So it's just kind of maximizing the equipment they have. But a lot of great progress is happening with electrification. Global Insights. I was recently at a panel discussion at the Norwegian consulate, and these slides were shared. So this is just kind of perspectives across the globe. The European Union, their views on reducing emissions at ports. They have a very clear ambition to do so, and they're looking at making their regulations more strict. China, believe it or not, has a goal of being net zero by 2060, and they're giving large investments in new fuels. The U.S., it's a mix. This is where we are today, politically, unfortunately. There's a lot of entities that are against a global carbon dioxide tax. But New York State and other states, especially California, have different policies and incentives that are encouraging these transitions to decarbonize the ports. This is the International Monetary Organization. Um, there's a net zero program adoption that's pending. And on the just independent commercial side, there's a large variation. You know, some companies are, some companies are kind of neutral and not doing much. Um, so you know, these are kind of things we've been talking about. There's a lot of solutions and strategies to help decarbonize. Using low carbon and carbon neutral fuels, biofuels, looking at energy efficiencies, fuel cells, hopefully rolling out hydrogen-based fuel cells, introducing onboard carbon capture, and even nuclear. Believe it or not, there's still a push with nuclear if you can do it safely. That's a very powerful energy source with zero emissions. You just need to contain the waste. Um, Three-quarters of the new orders for container vessels have dual fuel capability. And so that means, has the capability of using these alternate fuels. So that's nice to see. Three-quarters of the new vessels are allowing this capability. Um, This is just showing the share of emissions. The large bulkers and tankers and container ships account for more than 50% of the world fleet's emissions. So that's really, the bulk, the worst of the emissions are coming from these larger ships. Yeah. Kind of makes sense. Alternative fuels uptake. Um, so this is where we're seeing that transition to using alternative fuels by fuel type. So what we're seeing today is the majority, have that natural gas for now, but we are seeing an increase in methanol, LPG, hydrogen, and ammonia are the newcomers that are still being rolled out. But on the whole, the majority is still natural gas. So reduced emissions. So that transition is underway. Uh, bio blended bunker market is increasing. Yes, this is biodiesel. So you're seeing, these are major ports, Singapore and Rotterdam. They are increasing sales of these fuels. Yeah, methanol based, LNG based. So there's quite a ramp up going on. So that's a great trend. That's a trend you really need globally to facilitate production of alternate fuels and this transition. Um, so this is, where what the consensus was from the meeting at the Norwegian consulate. Geopolitics influence fuel availability and selection. The majority of bulker and tanker new construction opt for fuel-ready solutions like LNG, or ammonia-ready, or methanol-ready. Biodiesels and bio-LNG is likely to be the most accessible low greenhouse gas fuel due to existing infrastructure and production capacity. There is a broader range of fuel options available in the future. We just keep seeing this trend, and that's expected. Um, but there's cost drivers. As low greenhouse gas fuels remain affordable, their use will strengthen the business case for implementing energy efficient measures. So, again, as the demand grows, like you're seeing in Singapore and Rotterdam, that's really what's going to drive the market and help uh, ramp up the production of these alternate fuels. That's what you really want to see. And that also, with greater volumes, it helps bring down the price and make these fuels more affordable. So finally, we're going to take a look at Norway. And Norway is really leading the charge with green port initiatives and decarbonization initiatives. So we definitely have to take a look at what they're doing there. Um, so they have a green shipping program that aims to establish the world's most efficient and environmentally friendly shipping sector. So this is a paradigm shift in the maritime sector. Emissions are regulated and carry a cost. Growing green requirements from the market there is growing green requirements from the market, investors, and the public. So it's yeah, they don't have the geopolitical issues we do. Yeah, their population is on board with these initiatives. Climate change and new requirements represent a significant business opportunity. Um, and so the vision is to establish the world's most efficient, and environmentally friendly shipping sector, achieve profitable emission reductions, deliver sustainable logistics solutions, create green jobs, strengthen competitive advantage, release that dependency on diesel fuels and diesel fuels from countries you might not want to be doing business with, and achieve international leadership positions in this sector. So the program's tools and knowledge exchange includes addressing. They do the analyses, they look at the barriers, and they try to lay out roadmaps. And as they look at growing that knowledge development, they develop pilot projects, including feasibility studies, that are then implemented as a pilot project. Once you have those pilot projects, then you look to scale up low and zero emission vessels and opportunities um, to use
Josh,
them.
sorry to break it. 5 minutes heads up time.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we're getting close. We're getting there. Um, Yeah, so this is just the numbers. It's a very popular program there, doing very well. This is an overwhelming slide that shows you the 65 pilot projects that Norway is doing to decarbonize the whole supply chain with their ports. Very exciting. They're looking at everything, battery powered movements using hydrogen, offshore wind power, ammonia, all of these things we've been talking about. Norway's leading the charge, and they will tell you there's no one silver bullet. There's no one energy source that's that perfect zero emission source for everything. So everything is tailored to location, availability, price, what makes sense for that operation. So that's why you see so many different solutions. And that's the way they're approaching their green shipping program. But you'll have these slides. You can take a look. Just so much to dive into there. And these are all the different vessel types they have. Electric, hydrogen, ammonia, battery, and methanol. All of these types are underway. They're going to be completely off diesel very soon. Finally, the last couple slides. What is New York State doing about this? So, New York State is trying to. They have a whole clean energy initiative, really pushed through NYSERDA, New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. I do a lot of work with them, and so they are pushing. Right now, there's a port investment funding available. There's over 300 million in funding available for maritime port development and improvement projects. This will increase the capability for New York to support offshore wind industry. There's two active offshore wind farms under construction right now, Empire Wind and Sunrise Wind. And these investments will have multi-use purposes. So with that funding, there's opportunity for these ports to upgrade and decarbonize. There's also the New York Truck Voucher Incentive Program, for non-road improvement, port side. And so these are vouchers and funding available to upgrade their equipment and to be purchasing electrified equipment and low emission using equipment as well. So when these ports can use these funding sources, it's a nice incubator to help this transition. And this is just a quick look at the, New York's energy targets. I'm sorry, climate change and clean energy targets. From now to 2050. So there's a real focus on implementing renewable energy. By 2025, they have a goal and I believe they almost hit this goal. It's still underway. 6,000 megawatts of solar, and decarbonization initiatives, and greenhouse gas reduction. A big push, though, is that 9,000 megawatts of offshore wind by 2035. That's really to help power New York City and Long Island, close to the ocean where the offshore wind is. Upstate is a combination of solar, onshore wind, and hydro. So using the combination of all of those, the goal is to have clean, renewable energy, out there by 2040 or maybe 2050. But the transition's underway. So with that was my last slide. Open to questions.
Excellent, Josh. This was amazing. Everyone thank Josh and a round of applause. There was so much content